Okay, so we're at 1 Corinthians chapter 9. We're going through chapter by chapter, verse by verse. And this chapter that we're approaching right here is basically Paul saying that he's laying down his rights. Last chapter was about not eating meat. Even though we have the right to eat meat, that we would lay down that right for a brother or a sister. Before we get started, there's something that everybody needs to know and make clear because of the topic that we're on. Paul is basically going to confront his church on the fact that they don't financially bless him. So, let me explain to you guys, first of all, that I do not have this issue. Yes, thanks God for that. You guys do bless me tremendously, and even considering the amount of people that we have, I know you guys give above and beyond for the fact that we're able to run the building, heat the building, pay the mortgage, the electricity, buy a new drum set, things like that, give me a raise, take me out to dinner, anything like that, So I'm very grateful for this. I'm so appreciative for it. You guys just do above and beyond what I could ever ask for. And so me and my wife, Susie, are very grateful for you guys for that. So anything that I'm talking about in regards to this situation is strictly preaching, the Word of God. I don't have a motive where you guys need to know that there's an issue here and it needs to be corrected. Is that clear? I want to make sure that's clear so I can preach this not feeling awkward or anything because it's not. There's nothing there that is an issue. Thank God. Okay. We good? All right. Okay, let's start. 1 Corinthians 9, starting at verse 1. Paul says, "Am I not free? Am I not an apostle? Have I not seen Jesus our Lord? Are you not the result of my work in the Lord? Even though I may not be an apostle to others, surely I am to you. For you are the seal of my apostleship in the Lord." So he's already starting off by saying, look, are you guys not the result of my work? So if I was to get up here and say that, it'd probably rub us the wrong way. We'd probably think I'm being prideful and boastful and this and that. But Paul is confronting his body and saying, guys, come on. Are you not where you are today because of me? Because of me, you are what you are. Don't you see this? What is the disconnect in your mind? Is it not clear? Verse 3, "This is my defense to those who sit in judgment on me. Don't we have the right to food and drink? Don't we have the right to take a believing wife along with us, as do other apostles and the Lord's brother and Cephas? Or is it only I and Barnabas who lack the right to not work for a living?" So there's a couple interesting things here. Paul was single, right? We know Paul was single. And perhaps it was due to the Corinthians that Paul was single. Because he's saying, hey, don't I have the right to a wife? So there must have been some kind of a conflict within the body where they were saying, no, you can't have a wife. There must have been some kind of a conflict for him to say, don't I have the right to food? He says, other people get to do this. How come I don't? How come it's okay for everyone else, but me and Barnabas? Nope, it's not okay. It's not acceptable for us too. But you guys think it's okay for everybody else but me. That's what he's saying so far. So Paul basically comes in to a new city, a city of idolatry. He does a church plant. The church booms. It takes off. It does very, very well, right? The church is doing very well. There's a large amount of people there. People are getting saved daily. Things are going well, right? And Paul doesn't get paid. So basically, for Paul, it's almost like saying, okay, I'm going to start a business. And he goes in, and he goes into Parksburg, and he starts a business. The business blows up. It starts booming. And then everybody says, no, you can't get paid. And it's like, what do you mean I can't get paid? I started this business. I hired you. You're my employees. I got the customers in. I did all these things. And yet, I'm not allowed to get paid? That's where Paul's at so far. He says in verse 7, who serves as a soldier at his own expense? Who plants a vineyard and does not eat its grapes? Who tends a flock and does not drink the milk? Do I say this merely on human authority? Doesn't the law say the same thing? He's saying, a soldier doesn't work for free. A soldier gets paid to be a soldier. We hire the soldier to protect us. Shouldn't we hire a preacher to protect us? A farmer works in a vineyard. He's able to eat the grapes, but yet it's like saying this farmer cannot eat of his own food. This is what he's saying so far. All right, I want you to take a look at a couple of things real quick. When a preacher preaches, the knowledge and the teaching that he's giving you is valuable. There's value behind it. And Paul is saying, I'm worth this pay because of what you receive from me. And what is it you receive? You receive a teaching. And a teaching is valuable. Is a car or knowledge on how to drive a car more valuable? Some of us may say a car is more valuable. But actually, it's not. The knowledge of how to drive the car is more valuable because the car is nothing unless you know how to drive it. When we go to college or university, we pay our teacher to teach us knowledge. We know that knowledge has power. Knowledge is valuable. And so we're willing to go to a university and pay them way more than they really deserve to make in order to receive the knowledge that they give us. And the knowledge is not always good knowledge. Knowledge could be tainted knowledge, distorted knowledge, perverted knowledge, but we're willing to pay them for that knowledge because we see the value in it. In this case, the Corinthians did not see the value in that knowledge. They did not see that it was worth paying Paul in order to receive that knowledge. We need to start to look at these teachings as treasures. It is treasure. It is gold. Wisdom is amazing. You can have all this money in the world, and if you lose it and you have wisdom, you can get all that money back. If you don't have wisdom and somebody gave you $5 million, you could lose all that money and it's gone forever. We'll go to the movies and we'll be willing to pay for a movie that does nothing but instill violence, sexual immorality, perversion, all these things that are damaging to our souls. But we'll go there and we'll pay these people, these evil, wicked people, money to feed us with garbage. But then there are some people that will not pay a pastor, teacher, an evangelist, a worship leader, whatever it is, will not pay them to feed them holiness. Oftentimes, we're willing to go to a concert and we'll listen to this person that wants to be worshiped instead of investing those who lead us into worship. There is value in gaining godly teaching. Verse 9. For it is written in the law of Moses, do not muzzle an ox while it is treading out the grain. It is about oxen that God is concerned. Is it about oxen that God is concerned? Surely he says this for us, doesn't he? Yes, this was written for us because whoever plows and threshes should be able to do so in the hope of sharing in the harvest. If we have sown spiritual seed among you, is it too much if we reap a material harvest from you? If others have the right of support from you, shouldn't we have it all the more? Now this is what gets me. This is like what's interesting. Paul's saying at the end of this, you guys are supporting other people, but you won't support me? I'm the one that's here laboring over you every day. In fact, the reason why you're here in the first place is because I brought you here. I brought you here. I built this church. I did all these things. I raised you up. I led you to Christ. I've raised you up, all these things. And you're giving money to somebody else and not to me? It's strange. It's the Corinthians are a very strange group of people. He's saying, don't I have the right to the food that's in the temple? You know, I don't think anybody here would give me a problem if I went downstairs and I grabbed the bagel out of the fridge and I put it in the microwave or the toaster, I put some butter and I ate it. But it seems like the Corinthians would have a problem with that. They're going, hey, what are you doing? You can't touch that. You can't have any of that. And Paul is addressing this issue. If you notice these things happening, maybe you're friends with other believers in other churches, you know, kind of give that pastor a little support, a little help. Say, you know, you guys should be taking care of him. He takes care of you. You reap what you sow. Come on. So basically, it would be like giving a televangelist money on a regular basis and then not supporting me. Say, you know what? I watch this TV program and I want to give it all away to, you know, this person. I won't say any names. But you're going to send it, but we're not going to pay our pastor. Or, you know, we're going to give all the money to the Russia missions trip, but we're not going to pay you, Pastor Travis. And this is what he's going through. Imagine how he must have felt in that time. That's got to be like kind of wounding to your heart to be like, all I do for you, and there's nothing I'm gaining in return. All I do for you, and you take everything and you give it away to somebody else. That's sad. That's got to be really, really hurtful. Verse 13, don't you know that those who serve in the temple get their food from the temple, and that those who serve at the altar share in what is offered on the altar? In the same way, the Lord has commanded that those who preach the gospel should receive their living from the gospel. Look at that. It says the Lord has what? Commanded that those who preach the gospel should receive their living from the gospel. He's saying if they preach the gospel, it's a command that they get paid for it. It's a command. And yet the Corinthians still wouldn't do it. And Paul references Old Testament law and things like that. And he's saying, look, here it is, commands that say you should be paying me. And yet the Corinthians are still saying, nah, we're good. Now, it also says that Paul receives his support, however, from other churches. Now, this gets even more interesting. So Paul is in one church. His own church doesn't support him financially, but other churches are supporting him financially while he's preaching at this church. So, now here I'll challenge your heart real quick. Let's say that we filled this place up. I'm not saying now. Let's say we filled this place up. Church is booming. We got plenty of finances. We got plenty of people. We got plenty of pastors raised up, people that can preach, teach, whatever. And God says, all right, Pastor Travis, I want you to go down to North Carolina, and I want you to plant a church. Plant another Parksburg Community Church in North Carolina. And it was time for me to go. And I go down there, and things are working out good, but no one's paying me and things like that. And would Parksburg Community Church at this point be comfortable saying, you know what, we're going to support you while you go to another location and plant another church? That's what the church of Philippi did. They supported Paul while he was in Corinth. Paul's saying, no matter what the situation is, I'm still going to preach. I am still going to preach even though you won't support me. How can I not preach the gospel? How can I be held back from preaching the gospel? When I first got offered a position here, I also got offered another position at another job. They say, hey, we know you're not qualified. We know you never went to school for this. But we like your leadership skills, and so we're willing to hire you as a mortgage company. We're willing to hire you. We'll pay you $60-something thousand a year, insurance, and all these things. And I'd be doing pretty well in all these things. And I was also offered a job here as a pastor, and they said, we would love for you to be a pastor here, but at this point, we can't pay you that much. Not because they're being selfish, not because of being greedy, but because we don't have a lot of people, and this is the amount of money we could have, but the position is yours. And I went home and I prayed, and the Lord said, you go preach the gospel. Is money more valuable than my kingdom? How could I not preach the gospel? How could I not? How could I choose to go work at a mortgage company and gain money when I have the opportunity to preach the gospel? How awesome is it that I get to preach the gospel and make a living off of it? There's nothing better than that. There's nothing better than the opportunity to preach the gospel. How can I resist? It is irresistible. And that's also what Paul says. Paul says, now, their situation is different. Here, we just don't have the money. There, they didn't want to give him the money. They had it, but they didn't want to give it up. And even yet, he still said, fine, I can't pass up this opportunity to preach the gospel. I will still preach the gospel. How can I resist this thing? This is so great. Matter of fact, Jesus loved me so much, and he sacrificed his life for me, that in response, not because I have to, but because I want to and I get to, I will preach the gospel. Because he understood the price that was paid at the cross. He understood how evil, wicked, and sinful of a man that he was, and how much grace and mercy was given on him, how much he was forgiven. And in response, he said, how could I resist preaching the gospel? This thing is so awesome that I cannot contain it. I cannot hold it in. And what is in my heart must come out of my mouth. It is from the abundance, the overflow. He is so filled with this thing that he cannot contain it. It must come out. Verse 15. But I do not use any of these rights. Here's the turning point, okay? So far, he's basically blasting his church. He's saying, look, guys, you're not doing this. You ought to be doing this. In fact, it's a command to do this. And he's kind of like rebuking them. But then there's a flip to it. Here's the turning point. But, there's always, you got to watch the buts. They're very close. Don't watch the buts, but watch the buts on the scripture. But I have not used any of these rights, and I am not writing this in the hope that you will do such things for me. For I would rather die than allow anyone to deprive me of this boast. So he's saying, look, while I have the right, I won't use this right. That's the turning point. Okay, so what I want to ask you guys, while you have the right, even biblically, maybe open up the Bible and say, look right here, I have the right to A, B, C, D. And that's the truth. That's what the scripture says. Out of love for one another, can we lay down those rights? Can we lay down those rights? Johnny, that's Johnny over there. See, raise your hand, Johnny. That's Johnny. Isn't Johnny dressed nicely today? He's got the nice shirt, the suit jacket. He looks sharp, right? Now, Johnny is a professional hip-hop instructor. He's been on MTV and BET and all these, famous shows and things like that. And so generally, his style is the appearance of a hip-hop dancer. Johnny likes to wear his hat on a backwards and crooked. Now, he has the right to wear his hat backwards and crooked. If he wants to, he has the right to do that. He could come and he could hang around us at church, he can do this and that, but he lays down that right for the sake of others. Because perhaps there are people within the body that may not take John serious because he wears his hat crooked. They may not. Sometimes I may not take him serious. I'm just making a few jokes. So, he lays down that right to wear his hat crooked for the sake of the rest of the body, right? 90% of the most famous pastors in the world right now, they'll preach in a t-shirt and jeans, literally a t-shirt and jeans, and they're speaking before 30,000 people. However, we have decided that that's not the best bet for us right now. This is not where we're at. For the sake of others, I dress nicely, right? I hope do I dress nice? I look good? All right. So, I dress nicely for the sake of others because others may not take me seriously because of the way that I dress or don't dress. So we have to lay down that right. Now, these are just some very surface things, but know that you have the right to whatever job you want. Just like I had the right to whatever job I want. But I laid that down. You have the right to money, and you have the right to spend money. You can gather as much money as you want. You can spend as much money as you want. But do you lay down that right for the sake of the gospel? You have the right to give as much. You have the right to give as little as you want. But do you lay down your rights for the gospel? You have the right to say what you want. You have the right to dress how you want. You have the right to material possessions. You have the right to watch TV and any TV show. You have the right to eat and drink what you want. You have the right to read whatever book you want to read. But do you hold back these rights for the sake of the gospel? You have the right to stay home instead of going to prayer. The right to go to bed early for work the next day instead of going to a weekly service. You have the right to mind your own business instead of telling others about Jesus. But do you lay down these rights? I have the right to do what I want, but I'm willing to give up my rights for the sake of the gospel. I have the right to a vacation, but instead I'm going on a missions trip. I have the right to play PlayStation, but instead I'm going to spend that money and buy someone groceries. I have the right to sleep, but I'm going to get up early and pray and read my Bible. I have the right to complain, but I'm going to keep to myself for the sake of the gospel. I have the right to be upset. I have the right to be mad, the right to feel hurt. I have the right to work overtime, but I won't for the sake of the gospel. Church, I want you to fill in the blank. Think for a moment. We're going to take a few minutes. We're going to do something briefly. What things do you have the right to that you need to lay down for the sake of the gospel? and not something that you were already going to do or something that comes easy or something you did last week. I want you to really think, in what area do I have a right and do I stand on that right, but I really should let go of that right for the sake of the gospel? Susie, if you could grab that basket back there. And you can volunteer to do this if you want. You don't have to. But I would like each person to write on a piece of paper what right or rights they would lay down for Christ. Write it on the paper. Then you can come forward and lay it at the altar. You can put it in the basket. I won't read it. No one will ever read it. It'll go right in the trash. That's between you and God. But I do want to take a moment, and I want you to think about what right you have that you would set aside for the sake of the gospel. Go ahead, will you pass them out? Yep. Okay. Good? Okay, so this is the turning point where Paul says, I have the right to a wife. You running that up here? Go on, you run it up while I'm preaching, it's all right. So I have the right to a wife. I have the right to finances. Do I not have the right to eat from the temple? Do I not have the right? I have the right, but I won't take it. That's the turning point. He says, I have the right to these things. Clearly, you're not treating me the way that I deserve to be treated. You're not blessing me the way that I deserve to be blessed, but I don't care. I lay that down for the sake of the gospel. When I became a Christian, this is important, pay attention. The moment that I became a Christian, I became a believer, I came to the cross, I laid down my life. You have to understand that, church. This isn't an apostle thing. This isn't a pastor thing, a missionary thing. This is a Christian thing. If I am a Christian, I have laid down my life already. I laid it down at the cross. I said, this isn't about me any longer. This is about him and about all of you. It is loving God with all my heart, loving my neighbor as myself. That's what it is. That's what happened. The moment I became born again, I died to myself and I became a new creature, a new creation. Everything that I thought was important to me is not anymore. It is not about me, it is about God. I laid that down at the cross. I died to myself. It says we first, right? This is how you get salvation, you ready? First deny ourselves. That's first number one. Step number one. We deny ourselves. Step number two, we pick up our cross, a life of sacrifice, and we follow him. We follow him. There's an activation that takes place. So, I'm sitting in the pews, I'm hearing this message of Jesus, I come to the Lord, and what takes place? I first deny myself, I pick up the cross, a life of sacrifice, and I follow him. I do what he does. I go where he goes, like that song. I pray what you pray. I do what you do. I go where you go. That's our life as a Christian. Not a pastor, not a prophet, not an apostle, not a teacher. This is who I am as a Christian. Verse 16. For when I preach the gospel, I cannot boast, since I am compelled to preach. Woe to me if I do not preach the gospel. So that's that he's compelled to preach. And then he says, woe to me. Woe. Woe to me. Do we think that way? Do we think, woe to me if I don't do this? And why would he say, woe to me? We'll get into that more. If I preach voluntarily, I have a reward. If not voluntarily, I am simply discharging the trust committed to me. What then is my reward? Just this, that in preaching the gospel I may offer it free of charge, and so not make full use of my rights as a preacher of the gospel. He preaches voluntarily. Not even just financially voluntarily, but voluntarily from his heart. Guys, we have to be that from our heart voluntarily. We don't have to do this thing. No one's going to force you to do it. No one's going to make you do it. But there should be something within inside of your heart that says, I want to do it. I want to share the gospel with my neighbors. I want to share the gospel with my friends and family. I want to share the gospel with a stranger. I want to. Because this is the greatest thing in the world. This thing is awesome. And it's salvation. I can be free from hell. I can be free from sin. I can be free from the bondages that I'm in. Guys, don't you want this thing too? I mean, when you go to the store and you buy or purchase something you really like, or you go to an amusement park that's really fun and all these things are good, you're so quick to tell somebody about it because of how awesome it is. In the same way, we need to recognize how awesome the gospel is, how awesome salvation is, and it should be within our hearts with such joy that we cannot refuse to share it with others. If we are a Christian, we understand how good Jesus is. It's those that are not saved that have no understanding of how good Jesus is. So those that do know ought to tell them how good it is. And if we don't know how good it is, we ought to question our salvation, reevaluate ourselves, look at the Bible, and see the truth about how good Jesus is, how his grace and mercy saved us. That should bring joy to us. That should be something that is irresistible to share and irresistible to receive. Verse 19. Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. So he is free. He belongs to nobody, but he makes himself a slave. He's not being forced. He's choosing to be a slave. He's making a conscious decision to be a slave, to preach the gospel, to win as many as possible. This is why we come to church. Church. We come to church to hear the gospel, receive the joy, receive the teaching, to be equipped to go out and win souls. See, there's a difference. The Jews used to meet on Saturday, right? We used to get confused. Why we meet on Saturdays, now we meet on Sundays and things like that. Look at this. This is amazing. The Jews met on Saturday, the end of the week. It was the seventh day, right? So they would work hard all week. They'd come together on Saturday. They would meet and they would rest. We worked so hard this week. Come together. They'd spend a day of rest. But now we meet on Sunday, and maybe there's confusion because, we think Monday is the first day of the week, and we end with Sunday thinking that's the seventh day, but it's not. Sunday is the first day of the week. How does this work? We meet on the first day of the week to get equipped to go work the rest of the week. So we used to work, then rest. Now we get equipped to go work. See the difference? So when we come here on Sunday, what's supposed to happen, and we're getting there, is we're getting equipped. We're getting instructions. We gather together and we come up with a plan. What are we going to do this week? How is this going to work? And what do? We come together and then we go out Monday and we begin to do our work. Then we come back on Sunday and we get equipped again to go back out Monday. So Sunday is actually a commissioning day. It's a day where we come together and we say, okay, here's what the plan is. Here's what you've learned. Take it, apply it. Now go forth. Anybody watch football in here? We have a few people that watch football. Maybe you watch football. Maybe you've seen kids playing outside, whatever. How does this work? Okay, a football team comes together before a play. They huddle around. They come up with a plan. They figure out what the play is. Then they break, and then they go and they apply it. They do the action. Then that play is over. They come back. They meet again. They huddle. They come up with a plan, the play. They they figure it out, they break, and they go out and they do it. They don't first do the play, then come together and go, hey, how did that go? That went good? That went great? Okay, let's do a play again. Then they do the play, and then they come back and say, hey, how did that go? It doesn't work that way. They first meet, then they do. They first meet, then they do. That's how the church works. First we meet, then we do. Then we come back again and we meet, and then we do. Understand that? Okay. Verse 20, to the Jews I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law. So as to win those under the law, to those not having the law I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law. So as to win those not having the law, to the weak I became weak, to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. You're not just saved for you, you're saved for him and you're saved for them, guys. Listen, you're not saved for you, just you alone. Sorry. You're not saved for just you alone. You're saved for him and you're saved for all those people around you. And what Paul is saying is, he's saying, in order to win them, I go among them and I become like them in order to win their favor. And then when I win their favor, their trust, then I share the gospel with them and I pull them in. Sometimes we think, well, they're their own kind of people and I'm my kind of people. And they have their way of doing things, and that's that culture and this is my culture, and we'll just rely on somebody who's more like them to do it. Where no, we go and we infiltrate into their culture, into their way of living, their lifestyle. We become like them to win them. But in the midst of doing that, we don't sin. I will not rob in order to win robbers to Christ. I will not go dressed like a prostitute and stand on the corner with them in order to win them. I don't sin to win sinners, but I do sympathize with them. I do connect with them. I do go into their territories. I do, if I go to Africa, right? I'm going to Africa, I'm a missionary, and I need to connect with them and I need to relate with them. So I go there, I put paint on my face, I carry a spear, and I eat monkey brains. Am I willing to lay that part of my life down? I see a couple of you shaking their head, I'm not doing that one. But he says, I have the right to eat what I want. I have the right to go where I want, to do what I want, but I lay that down. We ought to lay that down. It says, I go and I become a slave to these people in order to win them. I become like a slave to them in order to win them. Maybe, we've been noticing more and more younger people coming here. And maybe we like hymns. We like hymns, but we notice for some reason, younger people have been the ones that have been coming in more often that are newer, and so we play a little bit more of a rock style. And so, that's changing. Maybe some of us are saying, well, we don't really like that rock. Well, that's where we lay our life down, and we lay down our rights to our own stuff for the sake of winning others. Well, we want to win them. We want to win their souls, and so we're willing to lay down our preferences in order to win more. Or maybe, there's somebody you meet at work, right? And this kid likes hip-hop. I'm not a fan of hip-hop. But I'm trying to introduce him to God. So I could give him my rock music CD. Or I could go find out who a famous Christian hip-hop rapper is and give him that CD. And so I would lay down that part of my life for the sake of others. And so we want to, in a sense, infiltrate cultures and become like them in order to save them and win them. I believe it was the Romans, this is really crazy, the Romans would take over a territory. They would actually infiltrate with Romans, I believe it was Romans, it may have been Greeks, but I think it was Romans, and they would begin to walk, talk, and act like Romans because of the amount of Romans that were in there. And so whatever country they took over would actually become just like Rome because of the way that they infiltrated and because they put themselves among the people. You know, there's times you could be among non-believers, and if you hold firm to your ground, they will begin to change and transform. You know, there's a family we know, they don't hug. That's not in their culture. But we go in there and we love them and we hug them and we squeeze them, whatever. And now that became a part of their culture where you go over to the house, you don't have to do anything. They'll come up to you and hug. They'll hug their brother, their aunt, their uncle, their kids, whatever. And it changed because of that. Because they went in, we became one of them. We showed them a different way of doing things and they adapted to it. Now we want to do that even more so with the gospel. Maybe we need to become more of a businessman to win businessmen. Maybe we need to work in an office. Maybe we might join a rock band. Maybe we may go skateboarding, coach a baseball, softball team, join the military. Maybe move into, maybe we'll sell our big house and move into a trailer so that we could win the entire trailer park. Maybe we'll eat monkeys, carry spears. Maybe I need to talk more like a child in order to get the children to understand the gospel. Maybe I need to become a little more educated and sophisticated in order to reach those that are more educated than I am. Are we willing to transform our life of comfort and rearrange our schedules? Change the way that we think and do things for the sake of others? That's a challenging one. But this is what a Christian does. The moment we became a believer, we said yes. It's not me persuading you now. It's not me trying to convince you or say this is something you ought to do or this is something you should learn. This is what happened the day you became a Christian. You said, I lay my life down. If you have not laid your life down, scary place to be. Paul says in verse 23, I do all this for the sake of the gospel that I may share in its blessings. I do whatever it takes. And just so you know, when I say the gospel, you know it's the good news of Jesus Christ. For God so loved the world, he sent his one and only Son. Whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. Verse 24. Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last. But we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No. I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. If Paul has a possibility of being disqualified, what does that mean for me? If there's a possibility that Paul can be disqualified from the prize, what does that mean for me? Maybe I need to beat my body into submission. Maybe I need to preach the gospel more. Maybe though I fear, I need to let go of that fear and lay that part of my life down and do whatever it takes, just like Paul is willing to do. This is interesting. He says, I run the race to win the prize. He also references in another spot where he talks about reaching perfection. The perfection that he's talking about is in according to the Olympic Games, which he's referring to here. Perfection is when you run so hard to win the race that you actually die running. You work so hard to win the race that you die while running the race. And they would call that perfection. That is a perfect athlete. That person reached perfection. And that's what we're called to do. We're called to run the race and run it in such a way that we work so hard that we never stop until the day that we die. And that is a perfect life in Christ. We don't give up. We don't fall short. We don't retire and say, okay, I'm done. Nope. Moses was going till he was, 140 years old? Something like that? He never stopped. We don't stop either. We don't call it quits. In the Olympics, the prize is perishable. It's gone. It disappears. Our prize will be for eternity. Or not. Are we striving to win the race? Are we running as though we are in a race? Or are we kind of doing one of these? Or worse, are we doing one of these? Or are we doing one of these? Or are we running full speed? Guys, just finish the race. Finish the race. Don't give up. If you're not running, start running. If you're laying in bed, get out of bed. Stretch. Do what you have to do. Get equipped. If you don't know how to do something, ask someone who does know how. If you want to reach your neighbor and you don't know how, ask someone, how can I reach my neighbor? Can you come with me to reach my neighbor? Can you show me how to reach my neighbor? God, can you teach me? Can you show me? Maybe I need to pray more. Run to win the race. Lay down your rights for the sake of others. That's what this whole thing is about. The whole thing is about laying down your rights. It's what you did when you became a believer. It should not stop now.